All right. So, welcome to the best damn warm up out there. Starting off, first thing is we're going to get into our three-way hip rocking. And the way that the three-way hip rocking works is you get into a half kneeling stance and you just gently rock back and forth. As you rock forward, you flex your glute of that down leg. So, we're going to hit 5 each side. So, the first time we go through it, you're going to hit going forwards with each leg. After you hit 5 each side, you're going to go to a 45-degree angle. So right here, given the camera angle, it looks like I'm kind of going lateral, but in reality, I'm going at 45 when you look at the direction that that down leg is pointing. And the idea behind the three-way hip rock is that here you get a better frontal view. The idea behind the three-way hip rock is that we want to open up the hip flexors in multiple directions. We want to hit our hip flexors. We also want to open up the groin a little bit. We don't want to do something super intense. And here we go lateral, so that 90 degree, so straight out to the side. And again, in that front plane view, you can see that I'm going back and forth straight out to the side. And that, again, opens up the hip flexor. It also opens up the groin and hits some of those adductor muscles. Now you get a side view, and you can see how my foot and my knee are in line right there. And you want to make sure a key point for this is that your toes are tucked. The back foot, those toes are tucked. And what that does is that lets you flex that glute a little bit more aggressively and get a little bit more of a stretch out of there. After this, we're going to go into our heel clickers. So the heel clickers are simple. It's simply bringing our heels together and then going back. You start in a 90-90 position. So your front leg is bent at 90 degrees, your back leg is bent at 90 degrees, and all you're doing is you're tapping that knee behind you on the ground and then bringing it up, touching the heels together. The goal is that you want to try to work on being as upright as possible and eventually getting to as little movement as possible in the upper body. Obviously, depending on your hip mobility, it will, you might find yourself leaning forward a bunch and having to move to accommodate and get the pelvis around to get your foot up. But the goal is that we want to get to a point where we can be as vertical as possible. After this, we're going to go into our shin boxes. Now, key point for the shin boxes, starting off with the shin box itself, is you want your feet to be pointing and pressing your toes down to the ground. So that 90-90 position, just like we did our heel clickers, but now we want to be pressing those toes into the ground as you roll so that as the hips roll back and forth, you're not moving and you want to keep that 90-90 position. The elbow touch on this one is simply getting that rotation and touching the opposite elbow to the ground past your knee. When you're going through the shin box, make sure that the first thing that leads is the knee going in the direction you want to. Finish off with that elbow and then roll the knee back, go in the opposite direction. You want to get as much space between the knees as possible when you're going back and forth for the shin box. After this is our hip flexor hamstring rock with a T-spine rotation. So a little bit of a longer stance now in that half kneeling, hands on the head. And as you rock forward, you turn into that hip flexor and then you rock back into a hamstring stretch and you turn into that hamstring. So we want to turn into the side that we're stretching. It's an easy way to remember this. And we're just getting, again, more opening of the hips, more opening of the hamstrings. And now we're working some T-spine rotation in there as well. A big part of the program and the mobility that we want to instill is that we want to get a lot of thoracic mobility through our upper back, which helps create a better posture. But we also want to open up those hips in multiple planes because the hip is a multi-plane joint. So getting real biomechanical and sciencey with it, we want to be able to open up those muscles in multiple directions to maintain maximum mobility, which is control of the joint, not just flexibility. We can sit here and static stretch and get flexible, but we don't actually have control over that range of motion that we're developing. The idea behind these mobility drills is that we're not only warming the body up, but we are creating control through bigger and bigger ranges of motion, which allows us to stay strong and stable. Next, we have our bird dog. Now, this is more of a core exercise than mobility, but all we're doing is we're reaching opposite hand, opposite leg apart. I'm at an angle here, but in reality, I'm trying to push my foot directly behind me. I'm driving that heel back. So you want to drive through your heel and reach that arm as high up as you can. Touch the elbow and knee together underneath. You do that 10 times, then switching sides. The goal is here that our toes are ideally pulled up towards our face and we're pushing through our heel. If you notice, at full extension, my hand and my foot are level and they're not actually hyperextending through the back. So if I were standing straight up, what would happen is the leg would still be in perfect plane with the back. Now, after this, we're moving into our quadruped Spiderman elbow touch and reach, which is just touching that elbow down to the ground and then getting a thoracic rotation through there, reaching as far back behind us as we can 5 times. Nice and easy. Now we're going to hit both arms on this. And what you'll find is that one side is going to be significantly more impeded than the other. That's normal. When you have the same side, hand and foot on the ground, your thoracic mobility is going to be limited just because of how the hips are aligned during this. So now you see we hit the other side, 5 elbow touches and reaches. Those elbow touches really help open up the hips again, do a little bit of a different range of motion than we've been doing before. And you get to see the struggle bus here as the super awkward rotation occurs. But again, the more we get to move our spine around and create healthy ranges of motion and get the blood flowing and open up all of those weird kind of spots, the healthier we're going to be in the long run as far as preserving spinal health. Now, after this, we go into our hollow hold. So the hollow hold is for that core stability. Plays a huge role in a lot of things to come, including push-ups and pull-ups and whatnot. So you start off in a push-up position. You want to pull those abs in. You want to suck that belly button in, pull the ribs down. You let yourself down until you can't fall back any further, and then bring the feet off the ground. And you notice the quads are flexed, legs are straight. I'm reaching the arms overhead, and I'm balancing almost on my tailbone there. It's the lower back is where my weight is. So I'm crushing my glutes as tight as I can. Speaking of, get into our glute bridge. So very simple, very basic, very functional, if you know what I'm saying. Brace the abs, so squeeze those ribs down. Ribs and hips should be moving together, and then just driving up. Crush the glutes, push them up to the ceiling 20 times. Very simple, straightforward, but again, the more repetitions we get of this, the more active and engaged and strong our glutes become. Plus, they will get a little bit bigger the more often you go through this, which is always a good thing. Now, coming up after our 20 glute bridges, we are going to continue strengthening our pillar. And the pillar is our entire core. So if you think of your torso and your body as being a pillar and everything moves off of it, everything from the hips all the way up to the shoulders is what we call our pillar work and our core. And in this case, we're going to move on to strengthening with the dead bugs. So think of a bird dog, but now we're upside down. This time, as we reach opposite hand, opposite leg apart, we're touching opposite hand, opposite leg, pressing our low back. We're squeezing our abs and pressing through the low back into the ground, trying to keep the tailbone a little bit off the ground. Shoulders can go back. Head, you want to keep slightly elevated and pull the ribs down. Think about pointing the fronts of your ribs into the ground. You'll feel a tremendous amount of tension in the abs. They're going to get super strong. Now we'll go back to functional pillar work with that glute bridge march. And here, all we're doing is we're just taking steps, bringing one leg up and stepping like we're marching. What this does is this forces us to engage the abs, but really gets a ton of stimulation and activation in the glutes because now we're getting that single leg effect and we have to fight that rotation as we move that leg. Awesome warm-up exercise. Again, helps get the heart rate up, but especially with getting the abs and the glutes working together, it's huge for our core. And this is where, as the warm-up progresses from just mobility also into core work and building up a strong pillar. And that pillar is what is the foundation for all of our training that goes forward. Any exercise you do after is always going to be better by having a strong pillar and core. Now, to cap it all off, we have our Hardstyle Plank. So we get into Hardstyle Plank, you go plank position. Feet are going to go out at a 45-degree angle for this. You're going to squeeze the glutes. You see me tucking the hips underneath. I'm packing into my lats by pulling those elbows down. You saw the arms slide a little bit. And then I make 3 sharp hisses in order to ratchet up the tension. And then I get 3 breaths in through the nose, out through the mouth. And that is the end of the Hardstyle Plank. And that is the end of our best damn warm-up ever.